Welcome to the Celebration of You. I'm your host, Holly Dowling. I'm thrilled to share with you incredible people from all over the world who are living and leading extraordinary lives. From overcoming immense adversity to discovering the secret sauce to leading with courage and grace. Their stories are going to bring you hope and inspiration. Now, let the stories begin. Welcome, everybody. So grateful to have you and all the amazing listeners. From what I understand, I always love to start off the show by giving shout outs to all the amazing people around the world who are graciously listening to all the amazing guests and their stories and the notes you're sending me. It's just riveting, and I can't thank you enough. And we are now in 84 countries around the world, and it's all because of the families, the women, the men, the children, the people out there that are gaining hope and inspiration by hearing other people share their stories. And today's guest, well, let's just say, you know me, Holly, you know, I get pretty darn excited about my guests, but sometimes I get a guest where I could just like jump over the computer, run through the phone line and wish we were sitting in the same room, because already I can tell he's going to be a new best friend of mine. And I just feel honored. So welcome, everybody. May I introduce you to the amazing Dave Sanderson. Dave, thank you for being here.
Well, Holly, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be with you today.
Well, you are, and I'm going to just say it right now. Once everybody knows who you are and here's the story, you are truly an angel on assignment. And
I think we all have angels around us that elevate us up, and hopefully I'm an angel to somebody. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And let's just start before I get to open up for many people will know who you are. Some may not quite yet, but just tell us right now, Dave, what you're passionate about in your current world. And then we'll go to the big story that provoked a book and all that you're doing too. But tell us what you're doing right now. Tell me about your world.
Well, my world right now has changed dramatically since what happened to me a few years ago, but I have the honor and privilege of not only speaking around the world, and I've spoken now in 12 countries and hopefully a couple more this year, and writing books, but I get to impact people's lives every day, which I never thought that I would do. And I've had an opportunity that opened up to me, and as God says, He opens pathways for you if you take it or you don't take it. And sometimes if you don't take it, He may never present that opportunity to you again. So I took that opportunity, but then it really started expanding and growing for me, Holly, because one of the real missions and passions I have now is for helping people reduce human suffering. Because what I'm seeing around the country and now around the world and the countries I'm visiting is a pretty common trait. There's pain. People have pain, a pain of uncertainty, pain of fear, and they've gone through what I call their own personal plane crashes in life, and they don't know how to handle it. So I have really made one of my passions now to help people to hopefully alleviate or at least reduce the amount of pain and suffering they're going through.
I love that. I love that, Dave. And it's just so apropos to realize how, I truly believe that God, when we allow God to have His hand in our life, miracles can happen. And the serendipity moments that when we never know what is upon us. And this moment changed your life forever. And what you just shared truly just to me embodies your passion that you can truly help other people take potentially tragic experiences and turn it into opportunities to survive and create your own flight plan. As to why Moments Matter, your book, and all from your experience on Miracle on the Hudson. The plane. Yeah.
Yep. I was very honored to be a part of a miracle. And I think there's miracles happening all the time, every day. But I was a part of a very visual miracle that not only happened in the biggest city in the United States, but the busiest time in that biggest city and the biggest stage you could be on. And it was, I think that was meant for a reason, that not only that happened there in that time, but I was on that plane because, Holly, I wasn't supposed to be on that plane. I was scheduled to be on the 5 o'clock flight that night because we started our day early, about 5 a.m., and we got done about 10 a.m. So it gave me the opportunity to get home early to my wife and 4 kids because I was traveling the entire week on business. It was like any chance to get home to get early, I tried to take that advantage. And when I called the travel agent, I worked with her, and she put me on U.S. Airways Flight 1549, which that day turned out to be a miracle on the Hudson, but it did not start out that way.
And to think you were supposed to be on a different flight. and because you wanted to get home, but more than that, because something much greater than you needed you on that flight to help all those people. So can you take me, I purposely have not sat back and watched, I didn't want to watch any videos of you telling the story. I wanted to because I love to have my own aha. I love to be as pure in the essence of hearing you tell this. Can you walk us through? Tell me about that day and what it was like from that experience and I know you've shared this 100 times, but will you do that for me and for the listeners?
Sure. Yeah. So the short version is there's nothing extraordinary about the day. It was 11 degrees and snowing, but that's New York in the middle of winter, so it's no big deal. And I was one of the first set of passengers to board the plane because of my status with U.S. Airways. I flew all the time, so I had a chairman status. So I was one of the first people to board the plane. And I went back to seat 15A. That's 4 rows behind the left wing. And I did exactly what I did every single time. When I got on a plane then, and I tell people what I probably hallucinate what everybody else does on a plane now. I didn't pay attention. I opened a magazine, started reading, and did not listen to the flight crew or know who the exits were. I didn't pay attention. And about 60 seconds after we took off, it's when I heard an explosion. And I never heard anything on a plane like that before. So sort of woke me up and got my attention. So I looked up and I looked out the window and I saw flames coming out from underneath the left wing. So I knew something had happened, but I flew so often, I thought the plane lost an engine. It wasn't that big of a deal to me at that moment in time because, I fly so often, planes have multiple engines. And, I felt him banking, but I thought he was going back to LaGuardia. But as we know now, he was actually banking to go down the Hudson River because no one knew anything what happened on that plane, which I think was a saving grace because what happened on the left side of the plane where I was at actually happened on the right side of the plane at the exact same moment. And I tell people one of the things that doesn't get talked about a lot is that because if people would have heard a bang, bang, then people would have thought, oh my goodness, this is a terrorist attack. Yeah. This is something going on. But it was bang, so everybody thought, okay, another engine, no big deal. He's banking. But if you saw the movie, Sully, as he crossed over the George Washington Bridge, and he only cleared the bridge by about 400 feet. And I tell people he does not get enough credit for that maneuver because the George Washington Bridge is only 600 feet up. And he cleared it by about 400. So he was roughly around 900 to 1,000 feet at that moment. And he was descending pretty quickly. And that's when he said his famous words, "This is your captain, brace for impact." And that's when I knew it was serious. At that point, I never heard that one on a plane. So that got my attention. And immediately the first thing I did is I prayed. First thing I prayed for is whoever that captain is, man, I just hope he gets me down in one piece. All I can envision from the other footage that I could remember is people coming back in multiple body parts. And I just didn't want, I said, at least bring me back in one unit so my family would know who I was. Oh. And the second thing I prayed for is the last person I spoke with, who was my client up in Brooklyn, to call my wife to tell her that I loved her. And the third thing is I prayed to God to forgive my sins. We were going down. I wanted to go up, and it wasn't looking really good. And I knew I had to get it pretty straight pretty quick because it was less than 60 seconds later when he crashed into the river. And it was a hard hit. He estimates he hit between about 100 and 120 miles an hour. Wow. So it was a really hard impact. But when he hit, I went back in my seat and up in my seat really quickly. It was like that jarring of a hit. And I came back up, and I opened my eyes and looked out the window, and I saw light. So I knew I had a shot. But I wasn't out because water started coming in immediately because as the plane landed, if you saw any of the footage, the plane's bottom basically was stripped off. And somebody actually was listening to the flight crew, went to that closest exit, which may be behind you, and tried to open up that door. And the door was underwater. So as soon as that person tried to open it up, water started coming in immediately. So now you got water coming in from underneath and from the back of the plane. So water to where I was at was about knee deep. It was all the way waist deep in the back and all about ankle deep on the way all the way in the front. So the plane was filling with water very quickly. And at that point in time, my game plan was just get to the aisle, get up, and get out. Yeah. But when I got to the aisle, something happened, and it changed the day for me, but probably changed everything where I was going to go because my mother started talking to me. And my mom had passed away in 1997. But there was something she would tell me when I was a child that came to my head at that moment, popped into my head, said, if you do the right thing, God will take care of you. And see, one thing I realized after this, Holly, and I didn't realize this before, but after I had many months to think about it, I said, one thing my mother did, she never told me what to do, but she would always make me make a choice, which was a great thing for me to realize because I don't think parents today, including myself, make our kids make choices enough right now to have consequences. And I think that's one thing I'm really working on right now with my kids is making sure they have to make decisions, and they may not be right decisions, but they have to understand how to make decisions, because that's what my mother did for me. And the choice that I made was to go to the back of the plane to see if anybody needed help, because at that point I knew I was fine. And I grew up playing sports and athletics and Boy Scouts, where I was always around a group of guys. And all the guys that I hung with always had everybody's back. I mean, I always was hanging with people that always had each other's backs. So I went to the back of the plane to see if anybody needed help. And once we got everybody out, I started making my way out. Now, at that point, I'm already waist plus deep in the water. It's 36-degree water, and it's dark in the back of the plane, and the bins are open. So it means luggage is flown out, and you can't see anything. So you're walking up the aisle, and every time you took a step, I hit something, and candidly, I could see whether it was a piece of luggage or a body, but all the further I could get up was 10F, because that's the first light that I saw. So I went out 10F, and all of a sudden I started going out, but I looked up and looked out, and there was no room on the wing for me. There was filled. There was no room on the lifeboat for me. It was filled. So that's why I was in the plane waist deep in 36-degree water for about 7 minutes holding on to the lifeboat. And the reason people ask me, why were you holding on to the lifeboat? I'm like, well, I show a picture of this when I speak. Because I don't know if anybody who's listening knows anything or ever been in the Hudson River. It's got a very fast current. That plane actually floated down the river about a half a mile in 24 minutes.
Really?
So as the plane was floating down the river, the little lifeboat kept going in and out from the plane because of the current. And no one, including me, like I said, I didn't pay attention to instruction. I wasn't the only person, because no one on the boat knew it, because they kept yelling, hold on, hold on. But it's actually tethered to the plane. Just FYI, if you're ever on a plane, those things are tethered to the plane.
Okay, good to know, right?
That's a good thing to know that you don't realize, but you find out. But that's why I was holding on to the little lifeboat, about waist deep in 36-degree water for about 7 minutes. And then I sort of looked out the wing, because the wing was filled up, and I was in the plane. And all of a sudden I see this lady, and she was holding on to a baby. And I found out later she actually had 2 kids on the plane. She had a 3-year-old on the lifeboat, but she was holding on to a 3-month-old, and she wasn't moving. And all the training I've had, Holly, and I've been, I was head of security for a guy by the name of Tony Robbins for 10 years. I learned and absorbed everything that he taught. And one of the things Tony teaches, and I remember to use, is how to interrupt patterns. Mm-hmm. How to break somebody's state so you can get their attention. So I yelled at her, and I yelled, throw the baby, throw the baby. And I didn't think she was going to throw her baby. And that never crossed my mind. But what happened was I got her attention, and she sort of looked at me like, what's this crazy man saying, right? But I got her attention. And then all of a sudden, there was this lady from Knoxville, Tennessee, looked up and heard me yell this and looked at the lady and said, give me the baby. And she gave her the baby, got on the lifeboat. And then you look out, and all of a sudden you see people walking on a wing, which is an unbelievable sight.
Oh, I can't even imagine. I remember that from the movie, but to see it in person, Dave, yeah.
Yep. So people are walking on the wing, and they got to remember, not only is it 36-degree water, but there's jet fuel that's leaked out because of impact, and it's slick, so people are sliding. That's why people had to take small steps. And one thing about the movie, they show people walking on the wing, and they did, but it was a little smaller steps because it was really slick. And but I was still on the plane, and as things were going on, and all of a sudden I felt the plane shift, and I found out later what happened. It was a tugboat that hit the front of the plane as he was backing out, which shook the plane. And we're 6-7 minutes into this, and I'm waist deep in the water. And when he shook the plane, water started sloshing back and forth, and I felt water going up my back. And the first thing I thought about was Titanic.
Okay, that's what I'm envisioning.
Titanic.
Yes.
Because when that boat tipped up, it sucked everything down in it. And I said, man, don't be sucked down in a plane. I said, don't be sucked down in a plane. I was really close to getting out. And that's why I jumped in and swam to the closest boat that I could find, and it was into that wing. So, I was in 36-degree water, waist deep for 7 minutes, and I had to swim to get off and save my life to get to the lifeboat or to get to the ferry. And when I got there, Holly, I went to the one, if you saw the movies, the one that had plastic ladders went down, and they're yelling at me, climb, climb, climb. I yelled up, can't. And all of a sudden, I heard my mom again, because the word my mother hated most in life was the word can't. See, when I grew up, if you grew up in our house, if you said I can't, and my mom said, if you can't do it, you're going to do it. And my mother's mindset, I realized after she passed, my mother's worldview was, if you can't, you must. That was my mother's total worldview. So I got one arm up, somebody got it, we got the other arm up, somebody grabbed it, and that's how I got off the plane onto the ferry. And that's how I started, at least to that point, as part of the rescue. And then there's a whole other story behind that.
When you say a whole other story, what do you mean when you say that?
Well, when I got in the ferry, I thought I made it. It's like I survived, but I tell to give the sort of the metaphor of the firemen because I do a lot of talks with firemen, and I tell people if you see these firemen, picture when they're going to these house fires, they're running in with their gear, they're loaded for bear, they got it going, and the next thing when they're coming out, you see them on the curb, they have nothing left. Their adrenaline is gone, and all my adrenaline was gone, and I was so cold. I can't explain how cold 36-degree water is for an extended amount of time. I could barely breathe. And I thought, I'm going to die. But then somebody put their iPhone to my face, and they let me call my wife. I could, she wasn't there, but I left a message. This is your father. I've been in a plane crash. And that's how my family found out.
Wow.
But then that took me to New Jersey because I went out the right side of the plane. So the left side of the plane went to New York. The right side of the plane went to New Jersey. And when I got to shore, there were 3 people waiting for me. There were 2 EMTs and a guy from the American Red Cross. And that's why I'm now a national spokesperson for the American Red Cross, because they were there not only the New Jersey side, but also New York side. And they carried me to a triage center, took all my clothes off down to my underwear. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting there naked with another guy on my left and a girl who was totally naked on my right. And we're all like looking at each other, but we're all naked. We're all looking at each other. What's going on now? We're all naked. I mean, no one's talking to us. But then a guy comes walking up to me with a card, says, I need your name and date of birth. And he writes on the card, he takes my right ankle. And the only thing I could associate, Holly, was MASH.
Yes.
Take your toe,
yeah.
card me out. I said, and I started thinking, I didn't make it. I like this movie. It's like the movie Ghost. I didn't make it. I'm just watching myself die.
That's what it felt like. You just knew that they were putting the tag on your ankle, like you were already dead.
I'm dead. I was watching it. I was ice cold. I had no clothes on. I could barely breathe. I had a tag on my foot. All the associated I had was this MASH. I am dead, and the movie Ghost is right. You watch yourself die. That's exactly what I thought. But then my EMT came back and took my blood pressure. It was 190 over 120. And she goes, we got to go stat. And I've heard that term on TV. When they say stat, they're taking you someplace. And that's when they started wheeling me out. That's how they got me to the hospital. And that's how they found out very quickly afterwards I had hypothermia. My body temperature was 94 and heading down, and everything south of my heart was frozen. My stomach, my intestines, my kidneys, everything was frozen. And it took them 5 hours to warm my body up. So that experience, when you think you made it and you don't, and then you think you made it, and all of a sudden you don't, and all of a sudden you think it was like a roller coaster, right? You're up, you're down, you're up, you're down. But candidly, when I was sitting on the floor in the triage center, I said, I'm dead. I'm just watching this whole thing play out.
Oh, yeah.
Just watching myself play out.
Dave, that's the story behind the story. And you are, and then the other 2 individuals that were laying next to you, the woman on one side, the man on the other, do you stay in touch with any of these people? Did they have a similar experience? Were they thinking they were like having this, like I've gone to heaven and I'm looking down at my body already? I mean, are these?
Well, I don't know about that, but I know the guy. I do stay in touch with both of them. The person on my left is actually the first passenger out. He and I went to the hospital together, and he fractured his sternum. And he's the guy. If you watch the movie, the guy who jumped in the water, who's like trying to swim in New York. That's the guy who played him.
Oh, really?
He was the first passenger out.
Okay. Yep.
So I was the last passenger out. He was the first passenger out. So that's why the media really converged on where we were at, because they had the story right there, front, first, and last. But then the lady who was on the other side, I talked to her a couple of times, but I haven't seen her much. I don't know what she's doing these days. But the guy on my left was Barry, and Barry's the one who's in the hospital with me, and we've done a lot of things together. And he was. He was going home because his wife had just found out she had breast cancer, and he was catching the earlier flight home. And he was in first class. He was in 1D. So he was in first class going home, and he fractured his sternum by impact. And then when he jumped, he fell in the water, and he fell flat on the water, which helped fracture his sternum.
Wow. And he survived. I mean, he survived. And I love how you guys have remained close and friends. And it's so fascinating, Dave, to hear this coming straight from you. And having watched the movie, right, you can see, from what I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but did they do a pretty good job of depicting this story in that movie?
I think they did.
Okay.
There's a couple things they took liberties with, which is not, if you didn't know the backstory, you would never realized. But about 90, I would say 95, 96% of it is very, very accurate.
Okay, good. Well, the only thing, and not that I want to dwell on this, but I was really bothered. The one thing that bothered me was the lack of credit I felt that the captain had been given for what he did. And so I can only imagine what you've lived with and your experience from that lens. as well.
Well, we were all interviewed by the NTSB. Of course, he and Jeff Skiles were interviewed a heck of a lot more than I was. I went to Los Angeles and had my interview with the NTSB in LAX. But he was much more intense, and we knew something was going on with him because he was never really up. I mean, we thought, well, maybe that's the way these captains are, right? Maybe they're just, solid, steady. But he was going through a lot of things, and he was getting a lot of credit, but there were a lot of people trying to take him down at the same time.
Which just makes your stomach turn when you think what he did in a moment that changed and saved every life, right? We could spend hours talking about that because I'm like, it's a celebration of who he is. Right. So tell me, my friend, so amazing, everyone survived, the miracle on the Hudson, what the experience you had that really changed the trajectory of your life from that moment on. And I know that this is part of your book and part of what you speak on, but share with me what are the biggest nuggets and wisdom that you've taken from this that you are around the world sharing with people. If you were to give me that wisdom and say, Holly, here's what I want you to know moving forward.
I would probably say there's two major things. First is one thing that I've realized, and especially being around the Red Cross, because the Red Cross never shows up when people are happy. I mean, there's always a tragedy, right? There's something going on, right?
Yeah.
So I've had the opportunity to go to places like Fort Hood in Oklahoma, Superstorm Sandy, and Florida, and places they've had. So I talk to people. One thing I find out is this: a lot of people get taken care of, like I did, because I was out there. But so many people go into a depressed state, or even worse, PTSD. And as we saw, Captain Sullenberger even had PTSD when he was going through his incident, even through a positive incident. So one of my big missions and what I talk about now is, and this came from an interview I did with AARP magazine now 4 years ago, when they shared a term with me because they want to use me as the story of how does somebody grow from a traumatic life event, while so many other people haven't. So they did the interview and they shared a term with me called post-traumatic growth syndrome. And that's why I did my TED Talk up in Canada last year at the Queen's University about this, because what I found is so many people are struggling and go into a depressed state, or even worse, depression, even worse, PTSD. And I share with them the strategies on how you can grow from a traumatic life event. Because what I tell people, Holly, and whether it's you, me, or whoever's listening, everybody who's listening is going to have a personal plane crash in your life. Yes. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a fire, a flood, a health scare, a hurricane. It could be anything. Unfortunately, it happened last couple of weeks ago in the school shooting. Something's going to happen.
Yeah.
You don't get through life unscathed, but you got to bounce back. And there's ways people have done it, and there's people who've gone the other direction. So my goal is to help people, like I said, reduce human suffering, share with them the strategies I use, and teach people on how to do that. That's number one. But the second biggest change, I think, and what I really talk about, is my worldview. And people say, well, what does that mean? And what sort of came to light for me, Holly, is, and this happened at the green room. Actually, we were in the green room of Good Morning America after I was on it. One of the passengers came in a rage.
Really?
And this guy was mad. He was yelling. He said they never wanted to see us again. We found out that his wife, he's going through a divorce. He lost his job. I mean, blah, blah. I was like, and everybody started judging him. And all of a sudden I started judging him. I'm like, well, maybe I don't know this guy's backstory. And all of a sudden, I start thinking over the next several weeks, like, man, how many times in my life have I judged somebody so quickly that I probably cut off a relationship that may have been good for me? And all of a sudden, I start realizing there's a lot of times in my life where I was really quick to judge. And I'm not proud of that. But once I realized that, so you know what? Unless I know somebody's backstory, the whole story, there's no reason for me to judge people. And as soon as I made that one shift, Holly, everything started opening up for me. I've met people around the world, presidents of countries, generals. I got to speak at the Supreme Court. I mean, I'm with you. I would never have been talking with you unless I changed that one worldview of being less judgmental. Once I did that, opened relationships that I never would have had. And hopefully I can repair some that I've had in the back, because we all have skeletons.
Yep.
Right? We all have those people that we wish we could do it over again. Hopefully we have a chance. But that one thing changed everything in the direction of my life.
I'm sitting here, and when you get to know me better, you'll know I get goosebumps when I get overwhelmed with a moment. And I just want everyone that's listening, I'm going to pause, because I feel like what you just said, Dave, it went right to the core of what we need now more than ever. We need human beings to realize that everyone has a backstory. And it's time to stop judging and making assumptions, right? And realize that every human being is truly a unique, beautiful human being, and they have a story. Oh. Do you know that quote by one of my favorite quotes that you would love, Dave, by Mr. Rogers? I share this from stage, but there's a whole story that goes with it. But did you know he carried around in his pocket one of his favorite quotes? And it was, "There isn't a person you couldn't love if you knew their story."
Yep. Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty basic, but true.
But how far removed are we from it, right? We're
Exactly
so
right.
easy. I was just speaking at an event this week and really looked at all of these big time leaders. And I said, it's time to stop putting labels on people's foreheads. We don't really know who they are unless we start asking and start listening and get to know. You never know what's going on in someone's life. So I had this visual of you sitting there in the green room at Good Morning America with this person running around screaming. And that moment, you could have gone two different directions.
And some people did. Some people were very angry at him, and he's been pretty much persona non grata with some people. And that, I think that one thing just woke me to a point where I just said to myself, man, how many times have I burned people because of this? Mm-hmm. I could have probably been in a whole different place if I had just I'd been less judgmental in my life.
But you are in a whole different place, and it might not have been right at 15 or 20 or 25, but we get moments that I believe are gifts, however we want to look at them. And you took this opportunity, which was the greatest life-changing. I mean, who knows how it could have ended? It ended as a miracle on the Hudson. But you've chosen, Dave. This is what I want everyone to hear.
That's right.
You didn't just sit back and be one of the passengers and now whatever people are choosing to do with their lives, you're choosing to make the rest of your life about helping others make a difference for themselves and others. And I love you for that. Can I just say that?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Because it wasn't a tough choice for me, Holly, but it was a tough choice with my family because, I've been a very successful salesperson for 30 years and all of a sudden you're going to do what? Right. But when you have your passion, when you can impact people's lives, and that is your mission, and you have to fulfill it because, God put you on this place for a mission. And some people don't get it until really late in life. Fortunately for me, I got it when I was 48. Of course, we'd all like to have it when we're 16.
Right.
But God's delays are not God's denials, right?
Exactly.
Sometimes that's why I call the book Moments Matter. You have to put those moments in. All those moments add up to that one moment when something's going to happen. Yes. And that's what happened. I think everybody's going to have that threshold moment. And they've got to realize that they got to open their eyes and they understand this is the moment, right? I've got to do something with it. And if you don't do something with it, God may never trust you again to do anything with it.
Oh, I love that. Wow. That was, and I love that you just said, God's delays are not God's denials. It's about the timing and then embracing it. And you're taking this and you're going all over the world. And I have to say, when I was reading about you and knowing that, you were head of security for Tony Robbins. And by the way, I have several friends and colleagues that have worked with him and helped run his amazing business over the years. So feel very connected to him through that 6 degrees of separation. And then to learn that about you. And then one of my favorite companies is ADP. And you were in sales for ADP, national sales. And so shout outs to all of this, but it also helps people realize, look at all that you could look at your resume and your bio and go, wow, how come, look what he was willing to give up to go take this moment and make it matter. No pun intended. I know it's moments matter, but you truly did it. And I have to share something with you. The timing of us having this time together and getting to share your story with the world. Just 2 weeks ago, Dave, and this is something that, we'll talk more about later, but it was heavy on my heart. I've just been watching a lot happening in our country, and there's been a lot of, and I know there's a lot of anger, and I know there's a lot happening, and I'm so big, as we talked about earlier, I'm big on women's empowerment. I also felt like we're just finding and just focusing on all the ickiness and all the ugliness, especially the anger and hatred in men. So I started a movement 2 weeks ago. Not all men are monsters. And I have to tell you, it's the men that I know that there's plenty of them out celebrating, right? Like yourself, that are doing something to make a difference. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome. I see the same thing. And, I'm challenged by that too, because now men are stifled. They don't know what to do and how to do it. Men want to be men. But now with all the things that are going on, they're questioning what is the limits? Where's the boundaries? What can I do? And all of a sudden they are not taking action, and inaction is the worst thing you can do. Is not taking action. So
Exactly. Well, and it's all about, like, I truly believe there's so many men that are saying, just tell me what to do, just like you just said, and just give me the tools, have somebody help me out here. And I think that as we as human beings, non-gender specific right now, we need to start shining a spotlight and celebrating the people that are making a difference, as to why the show is called Celebration of You, Dave. And I get to celebrate somebody like you. So what a gift. I love to ask my guests one question as we wrap this up, because your story is riveting. You've done amazing things. You continue to do. Go back to your 25-year-old self, or the young man back then, and with all the great wisdom your mother bestowed upon you, but going back to who Dave was at 25, who you are today, what advice would you give that 25-year-old based on what you know and who you've become today? Oh,
probably the first thing I said, Susie said, I said, don't think so much of yourself. I think I was pretty cocky at 25. I thought I had the world by the tail, and I was Superman, like most people do when they're 25. It's everything's ahead of them. But then you realize life is pretty short, and so don't think so much of yourself. Humble yourself, because one of my favorite sayings is, those who have the humility to prepare will have the confidence to execute when their time comes. Be humble, right? And because that moment's going to come. Be humble right now, so when that moment comes, you're ready to knock it out of the park.
I love the word humble. Humility and grace are two of my favorite words, because they go hand in hand. And most often, if we were to ask everybody listening, think about the people you admire the most. If you really sat down and thought about who those people are, maybe some are no longer living, they've just made a big impact in your life. If you were to write down the adjectives that describe that person or those people, humility, being humble would most likely be at the top of the list, right?
Yep, I think so. Yes. I think that's what God asked us to do, right? Humble yourself.
Absolutely. Right? Well, you have humbled yourself, and how you are taking this opportunity to really go out and make a difference for people. So I want to thank you for being with me today. I also would love to give you an opportunity for anyone that wants to learn more about you, get your book, learn more about having you come speak. Please tell us, what is the best way for people to reach out to you, Dave?
Well, I appreciate that, Holly. For number one, since I don't have a personal assistant now, you can go directly to me at davesandersonspeaks.com. I respond to everything, but LinkedIn at David Sanderson is a great way, because that's where I leave a lot of my business tips and business things that I do. Facebook is Dave Sanderson Speaks, and Twitter is Dave Sanderson too. But I tell you what, Holly, the best things that I'm doing right now, I'm really honored to do, is I have on Amazon do a daily flash briefing, and being able to every day share new content, and basically taking leaders like yourself and taking one of their philosophies or one of their thoughts and declassifying. So my show is called Dave Sanderson Declassified. If you have an Amazon Echo product, or even go to my website at davesandersonspeaks.com, you can hear these daily insights. But I basically interview somebody and take one thing, we'll declassify it so people understand, that simplify how they got to be where they're at. So I was really, really excited about that right now.
Oh, I'm excited about that. I can't wait to be listening. And I know we have a lot more conversations to happen, and we are connected forever. Trust me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm honored to be with you, Holly.
Thank you, Dave. What a gift. Thank you, everybody. And until next time, just get ready to hear another riveting, emotional, and amazing story. Thank you. Thank you for joining me for another awesome celebration of you. If you were inspired by this story, please share it with your family and friends, and hashtag Your Story Matters. I'd love to hear from you, so please leave a comment on iTunes. And absolutely, please come to my website, hollydowling.com. Leave a comment there too, and while you're there, pick up your free gift. Most importantly, though, just remember that your life is a gift from God. What you do with it is your gift back.